When we think about innovations, we typically think about new ideas. But new ideas are only a small part of the story. If you're anything like me, you already have at least 50 ideas on what you could be doing better right now as a manager, as a developer, as a mother. Tricky thing is, in order to pursue any one of those ideas, you would have to drop something, decrease something, delay something else. And while we already know how what we're doing right now is working out, we don't know if any one of those ideas would transform your practice or if it would be a complete waste of time. And that's the dilemma in innovation. Ideas don't emerge fully formed, ready to implement, but rather they're more raw material that requires time and effort, attention to develop them, to iterate them, to pivot them, so that they maybe become something valuable in the future. My work as a researcher and as a director of the Design Factory focuses on finding these practices through which we can move raw ideas into actual innovations in organizations. And today, I'd like to share two typical pitfalls where innovation gets stuck in organizations and teams, and some strategies that you can use to help them get unstuck. The first pitfall is running into a no. Study upon study shows that we're terrible at predicting the value of new ideas. If you've done any kind of development work, you've run into a situation where you and your teammates or collaborators or managers don't see the same value in an idea. Where judging potential, and particularly radically new ideas, are difficult to judge. They don't really fit the evaluation criteria and systems of today, making it guesswork. This means you can probably picture a situation where you've had an idea that you think is exciting, that's worth pursuing. You've done the legwork, you've formed maybe already a preliminary business case, but when it comes time to launch a formal development project around it, management says no. And that's the end of the story, right? Well, we've been studying product development in organizations, and more often than not, running into a no doesn't stop development work, it just moves it out of sight. When you have this situation, we see three types of different strategies that you can engage in. You can try to sidestep, you can try to shift, or you can stash the idea. In sidestepping, when one door closes, you try to find another one. So your manager said no. Can you find someone else to say yes? Maybe a neighboring product line. Maybe you want to bystep your supervisor and go directly to the CTO. We've seen product developers smuggle in development into delivery projects, or even going outside of the organization to suppliers or customers, co-developing the idea further off the books before then reintroducing it to the organization, this time in a more developed form and with some customer pressure to go along. This type of renegade development requires networks both within the company as well as outside of it. But also, a word of warning is in order here. Whether you're hailed as a kind of heroic champion displaying some Finnish resilient sisu, or if sidestepping is seen something that at least borders in subordination and is a waste of resources, depends on whether the idea ends up working or not. And that we don't know yet. If you're looking for something that is a bit less organizationally risky, you might decide to shift instead. In shifting strategies, developers go back to the drawing board to revise either the idea itself or how it's presented. For example, a junior engineer might enlist a senior colleague to run some added calculations, do a bit of further simulations, and then reintroduce the idea to their manager together, this time with better resources and a favorable outcome. This type of development often, however, relies on the ability to work overtime, continuing development on the sidelines before ideas get reintroduced into the official agenda of organizations. The final strategy is a bit less low effort, but also more risky in terms of whether it will help or not. In stashing ideas, sometimes the time, organizational priorities, or technology readiness level just isn't right yet. So instead of continuing actively, you lay low and have a great idea then in your back pocket when the situation changes, so that the conditions might be more favorable for your idea. To make stashing more effective, we see developers documenting ideas and sharing them with their colleagues, neighboring units, and other collaborators, so that it's not just them waiting for the right conditions to emerge, but the ideas enter the collective memory of organizations. In a best case scenario, when sharing the idea, you might even run into someone who does have the right conditions already in the organization, who then joins your efforts as a co-champion, and you're no longer pushing the idea forward alone. Whereas sidestepping, shifting, and stashing ideas help to overcome no's once they've happened, often it's more effective to kind of try to prevent a no in the first place. Seeding change helps ideas to become a part of the fabric of organizations informally before asking for formal commitments. There's a lot of different strategies I could do here, but today I want to highlight one of these, which is early involvement of different stakeholders. You want to scout for potential allies early on. Similarly, you want to understand the different concerns that might emerge sooner rather than later. For example, we've seen a product manager already into the very first kickoff meeting of a development project invite different stakeholders from across the organization very widely on the chance that they might be needed later on. This way, if, for example, later maintenance help is required in moving the development further in the testing phase, then the product developer was able to go to these different stakeholders and say that, hey, we've already talked to so-and-so in the very beginning, this is what they thought, this is how we've taken into consideration. And this way, without any formal authority around these different units or functions, you can get more amenable reactions to change. Because when we're talking about new ideas and implementing them, it's never about only working on the new idea, but rather ideas are embedded in the way that we're working. And when we want to change the results of that work, the ideas and outcomes, products, processes, services, we need to change the way we're doing our own work. And this brings us to the second pitfall. It's a little less dramatic than running into a downright no, but just as deadly. Imagine this situation. You've been able to bypass all the no's, sidestepping, shifting, and so on, and now have an enthusiastic yes from your organization. You're ready to go, ready to move from initial talks and development into testing. But then your collaborators are busy with other projects. It's difficult to spot just that right contact person in the organization that you're working together with. A material shipment gets delayed. Initial lackluster progress results in your idea being deprioritized. And then along comes, for example, a new AI evolvement that requires immediate attention from the organization. This kind of quiet crowding out is where most ideas actually meet their end in organizations. So rather than being outright discarded, they just get buried under other priorities, because attention, time, and effort are not unlimited resources in organizations. Particularly the more radically novel ideas don't fit easily into our existing structures, because the existing systems that we are embedded in, whether organizations, teams, or even families, are optimized to produce exactly the same results that they are currently producing. So the paradox becomes that the more novel an idea is, or a new method of working is, the more potential it has to create new value. But the bigger risk is that you run into friction in the organization trying to develop it further. We've studied how innovation efforts work out in companies and how different organizations try, fail, and succeed in pushing these initial ideas all the way into innovations. And what we've seen is this type of change requires a kind of 360 degrees efforts in selling. You need to sell change upwards, downwards, horizontally, outwards in the organization, any direction you can find. Because alone, without collaborators, ideas get boxed in and are unable to proceed. So in order to prevent crowding out, you want to find ways to build a community around your ideas and gain and sustain some momentum. For example, here in Finland, we study the OP Financial Group, a financial organization, over a century-old one, some 13,000 employees, over 4 billion in annual revenue. We went back some 1.5 decades ago, when design was still more new in technology organizations and financial organizations, and looked at how design started to gain a foothold in the company. And what we saw was a kind of meshwork of efforts in building together leverage points and momentum for new initiatives in the organization. For example, in the very beginning, some 15 years ago, OP Financial made investments in new agile digital development in their Oulu unit, some 600 kilometers here from the headquarters in Helsinki. With this more agile ways of working, it was easier to introduce design into the organizations and designers. With a bit of more space to operate and incorporate in new product development, early efforts produced small wins that became benchmarks in the company, with managers across the country coming to observe the Oulu unit, benchmarking their operations there, looking at what agile development looks like, with a side of design already there. Later on, when design was already more incorporated into the organization, we could see finding further leverage points, trying to convert just interest in design into actual action. For example, one pivoting turning point was to create a new type of position, business designers, to help increase the perceived business relevance of design in the organization. Events like the Design Days helped to showcase what kind of value design was already delivering in the company and offered enthusiastic collaborators a concrete action point: collaborate with the business designers as a next step. Indeed, while it's hard to predict which ideas exactly will turn out as the valuable ones, it's easier to think about creating the type of conditions where there's a fruitful collaboration breeding ground for ideas and exploration of what they could become. In order to sustain such momentum, we want to combine both the human element and systems element in organizations. So we build communities, whether there's steering groups building some process commitment, or they might be ambassador groups of change agents across the organizations helping to spread the work. But we want to also make that not an uphill battle, but tweak our systems so that we remove key frictions, key blockages from the system, so that these communities actually have the space to work. This could be small steps, such as making it easier to collaborate across different units or functions, aligning KPIs. It might be about embedding user research into the process guidelines. We can't change everything at once, but rather than trying to first wrap up the entire community bit or wrap up the first systems bit, we want to proceed hand in hand so that neither humans or systems hold one another back. As leaders, the lesson is to figure out how we can create these types of spaces in our organizations. Often, learning about innovation and getting innovation unstuck is about finding that room for experimentation, looking for spots where we can easily gain collaborators, voice new ideas, and test them a bit further. We can't invest in all of the new ideas that we would want to, but what we can do is give them a bit of breathing room so that it's easier to make more informed decisions based on early exploration, when exploration is still cheap and quick to do before larger investments. This way we get early input data on whether something is working out, or if we want to go into another direction. At the Design Factory, where I work, we try to create such of a bubble for innovation, space for ideas to float around, to be discussed, and critically, to be moved from conversation into tangible action, whether that's prototypes, collaboration, or tests. We try to find creative ways of saying yes to new ideas rather than saying no, taking the risk that we might help a few ideas that don't require it, but prioritizing being able to give a bit of exploration room for those ideas that are difficult to judge in the beginning. And crucially, also give space for those champions that might be the leaders of our next transformations. My key message from the research that I've been doing for over a decade is that while innovation is a company-wide effort, helping to get innovation unstuck in companies can come down to very human scale, small but well-timed and well-placed actions. So the next time that you have a new idea, ask yourself what would be the least you could do. Not wait for a perfect timing when all the stars align to move forward, but identify tiny things that you could do to explore a bit further what the value of this new idea could be. Bonus points if you're able to involve someone else, no matter how briefly. Float the idea with a customer. Jointly ideate for 5 minutes with your colleague on your morning walk. Maybe you visit a production site. This way, step by step, we start to bring the collaborators in, the track record of progress, and move ideas towards innovations. And this way, it can actually be you and your allies that gets innovation unstuck in organizations. Thank you. Kiitos. Tack.